also possible a reversal of Brexit. In either case, a very high level of uncertainty just weighs negatively on investments, something we've already seen for UK.
Markets and I think economies hate uncertainty. Talking about China before I move to India, China's economy, and there's a lot of debate about its slowdown, but at a $14 trillion nominal GDP, isn't 6.6 or 6.5% perhaps the new normal and the world needs to make its peace with it?
This was in our forecast from last October, that the Chinese economy would grow at 6.6% in 2018 and then slow down somewhat in 2019 and 2020. So that is very consistent with the mature stage of the Chinese economy, and that is consistent with China rebalancing away from industries towards services. So that is not the news over here. The news would have been if there was a bigger correction, but we haven't seen that.
And you don't expect that either? Not a crash landing?
The risk does remain, and it depends a lot on what happens with the trade discussions. That is an important factor. But again, at this point, we don't know where that'll end.
And you have underlined it as a risk factor for the global economy as well. Talking about India, your outlook says that India growth is projected to pick up in 2019. What could the tail as well as the headwinds be? Because for very long now, India has been a one-engine economy. Consumption has been the mainstay. Can it continue to throttle growth, really?
So India, remains one of the fastest growing large economies of the world. And it is one of the few countries for which we have our estimates actually point to an increase in growth rate for 2019. There are two reasons why we've increased that. We expect the growth to go up. We've revised our forecast upwards. One is because of the declining commodity prices, which helps India. And the declining commodity prices also makes it easier for the RBI to have a fairly neutral or accommodative monetary policy. So both of those get factored into a higher forecast for India.
Before I go any further in the fiscal and the monetary space, I think we're also speaking at a time when there's going to be election year in India. I don't want to get into the politics of this, but a government is going to seek a re-election. The opposition will obviously not want that. But in terms of the last 5 years of the Modi government, what would you believe, how would you assess the performance? What have been some of the key achievements according to you and perhaps the laggards?
There are a few accomplishments of this government. The goods and services tax is an important one. The bankruptcy reform is an important one. The setting up of the inflation targeting framework is a very important one. And we've seen an improvement in the ease of doing business. So those were all good measures that were taken by this government.
And what would be some of the concern points? People believe perhaps the agrarian stress or the lack of jobs, not just for this government, but for the economy as large, pose a threat. In an election year, do you believe those become more important?
These are two sectors for which we continue to need to do a better job, both on the agricultural side and on creating jobs. There can't be quick fixes like loan waivers. The skilling programs, the state-sponsored skilling programs have not worked that well, and maybe we need to have it done more with the private sector in terms of firms providing in-house training to workers. That would be a better alternative. On the agricultural side, there is obviously a lot of distress on the farmers, and I would think that a more cash transfer-based approach rather than farm loan waivers or input subsidies would be much better.
If I can ask you a question, and you talk about fiscal correction, and I think I've mentioned that your outlook also talks about that. Fiscal correction is something that everybody is looking out for. If the budget does make room for an agri-relief package, do you believe it's going to be a rational move? Will markets understand that and not treat it as a populist measure?
It is important for India to stay the course on the fiscal side. Fiscal consolidation, if you look at the aggregate deficit for India, which is combining the center and the state, that hasn't improved much in the last 5 years. So that is something that needs to be addressed. Now, this is, of course, a pre-election year, but it is very important that India pays very close attention to the deficit and stays within target.
On that note, thank you very much for speaking to us. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Supriya.
Can I take one last question with her?
Right, so that's the IMF's Chief Economic Advisor, Gita Gopinath, there, talking to to ET Now's Supriya Srinivasan talking about the growth prospects for India. She says that they've revised the growth prospects for India for the upcoming year. In fact, talking about various things, including the changes made by this government, including bringing GST, which have helped growth in the country.